Welcome to another edition of The Road to Las Vegas. I'm Ted Robinson. And as always this week, we'll get you caught up on what happened on that road this past week in the WCC with scores, the standings, the highlights, interviews with student athletes, and this week a couple of extras for you. We'll first talk to some of the league's head coaches and talk about how recruiting has changed in this era. And we'll explore the WCC's ties to the very prestigious NCAA Men's Basketball Tournament Committee. But first, as always, let's get you caught up on the road and look at the week past in the WCC. The West Coast Conference Men's Basketball Player of the Week, Matthew Dellavedova of St. Mary's. The Gales went 3-0 last week, and Dellavedova led the way with almost 21 points and over 6 assists per game. And he delivered big, a career-high 27 in a win over USF and 26 in the notable win over Gonzaga. On the women's side, the player of the week is St. Mary's senior guard Alex Carbonell. She led the Gales to a pair of road wins, including a 3-point triumph at number 22 Gonzaga. Carbonell averaged 16 points per game in the 2 road wins for St. Mary's. The popular WCC Live talk show is back with an all-new episode this week. Catch it each Wednesday night leading up to the tournament in Las Vegas, and here are the guests on this week's show. Now you can listen to WCC Live each Wednesday at 8 p.m. Pacific on Blog Talk Radio or download the podcast to listen on demand anytime. Before the season, the West Coast Conference held its first ever basketball season tip-off event at YouTube headquarters, a significant moment for the WCC. And once again this week, we're going to have a chance to watch some roundtable discussions held during that event as Sean Farnham spoke with the league's head coaches. Topic this week, recruiting and how it's changed in recent times. Sean speaks here with Santa Clara's Kerry Keating, Bill Grier of San Diego, and LMU's Max Good.
We're going to take a look now at the recruiting process and how that's kind of evolved over the years, and 3 coaches in the West Coast Conference that have a vested interest in the recruiting process and how it's continued to evolve. Kerry Keating from Santa Clara, Max Good from LMU, and Billy Grier from San Diego. And I guess let's first of all talk about the schedule as far as the recruiting process goes and how that's evolved over the years. Now there seems to be a larger emphasis obviously on the summer recruiting period. Some of those spring weekends are going to open up, and we'll start with Kerry. And how difficult is it for you guys during the month of July in particular when your staff is out trying to see as many kids as possible in such a short period of time?
There's a lot of kids, and obviously they're playing in a lot of events. The AAU over the last 10 years has really evolved into becoming its own entity. Max can probably attest to the fact that before AAU you're dealing directly with high school coaches, directly with the kid. AAU has kind of brought in this whole element of dealing with a lot more people, the extra coaches, the extra people involved with the teams. With all that, you got to make sure you have all your bases covered, and those events in the summer are a great way to get the evaluations done, but also assess who's involved in this whole process as far as recruiting goes.
Max, obviously, Kerry bringing up the fact that the game has evolved away from. Do you think it's a positive that shifted away the focus a little bit, or how do you evaluate kids when you're balancing the AAU setting, which seems to be more of a showcase setting, versus a high school setting where you're dealing with more of the team aspect, program aspects?
Well, you can see more kids under one tent, obviously. It used to be, you identified kids and then stayed on them. Now, in some cases, you identify them and then follow up with the AAU programs. But you're always looking at the guys that you've earmarked and identified, but then in watching them in the summer, almost always you come across some others that pique your interest for sure and get your attention.
Social media seemingly has been important, Coach, in this evolving change, whether it's Twitter, accounts for the kids, the coaches, YouTube, all the various avenues now to evaluate players. How do you kind of balance that all out and try to identify the players that fit best in your individual program?
Well, certainly it's not an exact science, recruiting, and I think as they both said, now there's certainly a lot more exposure these players have, not only in the number of events, the number of teams, number of kids out there, but also in stuff that's available via the internet. And through YouTube and some things like that, you have access to see kids, maybe in a different part of the country that you've either heard about or found something out about that maybe you saw them once in a game in the summer just because you were watching someone else. You want to try to find out a little bit more about them, and so there's certainly that kind of access now that's changed so much, in the last 10 years.
Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate your thoughts on recruiting and where we're kind of standing at right now.
The NCAA Men's Basketball Championship captivates all of us every March. Selecting that field is an intense assignment with immense responsibility. And this year, WCC Commissioner Jamie Zaninovich is in his first year of a 5-year term as part of that group. It's something the WCC is familiar with. Longtime Santa Clara coach and athletic director Carol Williams previously served on this committee. And now let's take a look at the WCC's connection to the NCAA Men's Basketball Committee.
One of the great professional experiences I've had was being on that committee.
Everybody would agree one of the most unique things in college athletics and athletics more generally.
It's normally a 4-year period, and I was sort of in a time frame that they wanted to adjust some periods with some of the members so we had less people leaving at one time.
Well, I was fortunate to come through a process that works within the NCAA through the administration cabinet. In conversation with our conference, our executive council decided they would like to put me forward for the position. I made my way through the administration cabinet and was very fortunate to be voted on the committee of 10 folks who are in the men's basketball committee.
Members of the committee are generally administrators or either commissioners. It's good if you have some basketball experience, but not necessary.
All committee work, including men's basketball committee, is voluntary. So I have a whole other job to do, which I love. And I think the simple answer to that is you have a great staff.
The committee takes a lot of time. There are a lot of meetings, not just during selection weekend, but prior to that. And the committee is responsible not only for selecting teams, but selecting sites, the oversight of officiating. It took a lot of work, but it was all well worth it.
Two main things we do. One, we're responsible for selection and seeding of the men's basketball tournament every year. We're also responsible for overseeing the operations of the championship, including the Final Four.
I might have seen a week, maybe 100 teams play. It's that invaluable to be able to see teams play.
From here, we're in straight monitoring mode, where we're each assigned a number of conferences that we're responsible to monitor, watch games, track data, understand who's performing where, to make the most informed decisions on the 37 at-large bids that we'll decide on in March.
As committee members, not only responsible for certain leagues, which we report out on, but you need to evaluate that team or your teams from your league against teams across country.
I have 3 primary conferences and 4 secondary conferences. So my primary conferences are the Big West, the Western Athletic Conference, and the Patriot League. And my responsibility in those 3 conferences is just to have a knowledge base of what those teams are doing and how they're performing throughout the season.
I think it's interesting to know that the committee members, when they go in that room to make the decision, they leave their egos at the door.
There's a culture on the committee where everybody sort of takes off their parochial hat when they walk in the room, and there really is a responsibility, not only to the tournament, but to the game of men's basketball.
Jamie was very excited about being, and I was excited for him. I think Jamie will do a wonderful job. He's extremely enthusiastic about the game of basketball. Those are the type of committee members that you need.
It really captures the American psyche in a way that very few other things do for a period of time.
Well, as we move into mid-January, the focus on all-conference play really intensifies. And so that gives us a chance to look ahead on the road to Las Vegas and what's coming up this week in the West Coast Conference. On Thursday night, a resurgent San Francisco team travels to Spokane to face Gonzaga in a game seen on ESPNU. Then on Saturday, Bay Area rivals collide when Santa Clara hosts newly ranked St. Mary's. On the women's side, Portland and San Diego take center stage Thursday night when they meet in a nationally televised game. On Saturday, BYU welcomes the Pilots to the Marriott Center in a game on BYU TV. And then Monday night, San Francisco welcomes St. Mary's to the Hilltop. Well, that does it for this week's edition of the Road to Las Vegas. Don't forget that as the conference weekend goes on, this is your one-stop shopping home for all things WCC sports. And don't forget to join us right here again next Wednesday for the newest edition of the Road to Las Vegas. I'm Ted Robinson.